Welcome to Podluck. In this podcast, we question what's on the table, being what are we eating, how it got to the table, and who gets to eat. Our socioeconomic approach to food will look at how the intersection between one's economic spectrum relates to their access to goods. In each episode, we discuss how food plays a part in influencing the present and the future of culture, the economy, and social issues. So get cozy, dig in, and feel free to ask for seconds, because much like a potluck, we encourage you to leave with leftovers. Today's episode, we converse over the definition or the idea of what defines American cuisine. Today's guests are Kevin Eddington, Vincent Ortiz, and Ivan Nikolic. This discussion will be had over a pan-seared bison burger, complemented with a chipotle barbecue sauce, melted aged cheddar cheese, crispy applewood smoked bacon, and fried buttermilk onion rings. Be sure to chew as you bite into this episode's layers of information and perspective. Welcome to Podluck.
Yes, sir.
The idea is we're discussing food. We're discussing it and its socioeconomic influence. Ideally, just like you would with a potluck, you're going to leave with something as we're all contributing. So, today's topic is going to be defining American cuisine. Like, what is it? How's it changing? Like, and what kind of influence it had on us, like from our first experiences with it all the way through now and maybe what it will be later. So to introduce everybody a little bit, we have Yvonne, works at food retail.
Yes,
so
sir.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, a little bit about me. I grew up in London, England. I came over to California initially to go to college and play basketball. And I found myself working in organic food retail, focused on kind of local farming, farm to fork. And I absolutely love food.
Awesome. I mean, good. Glad you're here. A special guest from Long Beach, Kevin.
LBC.
Right. Tell people about you a little bit.
Yeah. So super honored to be, at the dining room table in more ways than one. Came to know Bryan many years ago. Cooked together, and also just equally loved food. Now just moved on over into a different sort of corporate life outside of the kitchen, but still have a deep love affair with food and think about it pretty often.
All right, and Mr. Vincent Ortiz, our creative director in all of this, who helped put it all together. So obviously tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so first of all, I met Bryan at work. We both worked at the same place, and I gotta say, we kind of connected on a level that had nothing to do with food to begin with. It was music first.
Right, it was music.
And then, food came after. I'll say it's like I love food, and like Yvonne said, I had a lot of the same experiences working for the company we work for. And it kind of brings new meaning to the experiences I had as a kid eating certain things. Working at this place helped me understand those experiences more. But yeah, I'm an art student, so that's what I do. I love filming, doing audio stuff, so yeah.
Food is art.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. That's where we get along.
Yeah.
And for those, just to kind of brush up on myself, since everyone seems to think that I'm the center focus of this.
You are.
As you are.
Basically.
I've been in this industry for about a little 20 years now. Like, from everything from fine dining to the mom and pop places to food retail, and I've just as I've done it, and I've been in different regions and cultures and things like that. You just start seeing it as something so much larger than the food that's on your plate. Mm-hmm. It really becomes this thing of like, well, everything from sourcing things is trying to help with sustainability to I'm cooking for somebody that I care about and the passion that goes into that. Just kind of a really quick story that motivated me to really get like my heart into it and go further than just cooking at the time. Mm-hmm. Was an old couple that came in and asked us to just do whatever they want. And we were like, okay, we can have fun with this. We came up with a dope menu for them and we just went all out. surprisingly, they also told us that night that the customer's wife was diagnosed with cancer. And this was kind of the last hoorah. And that changed my entire perspective of what I was actually doing.
Because they chose to have it there?
Exactly. It became it's like, no, I'm giving now. Like,
right.
You're actually, this whole process is way more than just, food.
And they obviously
it's not just nourishment.
Right.
It's not just nourishment at that point.
They obviously, and as much as they obviously loved the food, that wasn't the only reason they came there. It's the service, the people, the atmosphere, and the reason people choose to go to their favorite places is all of it as one and never just one part of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The experience.
Exactly.
And in fact, so you can make the argument that the atmosphere sometimes is greater than the food.
Yeah, absolutely.
And service too.
Yeah.
Too.
And I think this is a great segue to why this is called potluck and where we're at. Is that same idea of we're coming together, we're bringing things, we're bringing our experiences, we're bringing every new thing and trying to leave with something just a little bit more and a new insight on things. So today's topic, now we've talked enough about me. Today's topic is, defining American cuisine and American food and what it actually means to you. So as we're doing that, I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah.
What was your first food memory? What was your first experience for American cuisine?
American cuisine. Yeah, what does American cuisine mean to me? I arrived in this country. Well, interestingly, the first place I went in North America was Canada, and that was my first experience into North American food or kind of Western American cuisine because it's slightly similar. And the first thing I had over there was a burger and fries, the kind of stereotypical classical American meal. But what I remember about that was the quantity of cheese was more than it was more than I'd ever seen in my life, and I couldn't finish the portion. I'd never seen cheese on fries before.
Wow.
Where I grew up in England, of course you have fish and chips, but you would dip fries into things, not have them lathered.
It's a great adjective. It's a great adjective.
So, although that wasn't America, that was a good warm-up into what I would experience in America. Now, the only difference about burgers and fries in America was the same as Canadian, but double the size. So my first experience here was the burger. And interestingly enough, I think this is how me as a European, this is what I would describe as the quintessential American barbecue burger.
Okay.
This isn't the type of burger that I would see in Europe. The kind of the fried onions, the bacon, the barbecue sauce.
The dressed up burger.
Yeah. The classic burger there is more along the lines of kind of mayonnaise, tomatoes, cucumbers even rather than pickles, and raw onion rather than grilled. And it's a different flavor.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say the burger for me is American cuisine, but overall, one element to me that just screams American cuisine is the idea of not quite overconsumption, but to not be hungry or lots of options and large portion sizes. And after all, the buffet was created here.
That's true.
So
yeah.
I'll let you answer that next.
No, you're right. Like the food buffet, when you think about that and how it's cheap. And you get as much as you want. You just fill up. It's not about quality. It's about trying to feed a need at the lowest price possible. Kevin, obviously you're from here, but what was your or how would you define what American cuisine is now and like where it's going?
I mean, I think that's
and what's memorable.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start off with the latter before I move into the former. Like, what is like my first food memory? If I might be able to start off with that. Yeah. My first food memory is crazy. I was in the first grade, and my first food memory was chocolate milk, and went to a public school.
I wouldn't have thought about
that. No. And I love chocolate milk because we never had it at the house,
right?
Because of how much sugar was in it, right? And so anyway, and this is way back when chocolate milk was a quarter, right?
Okay.
And my dad would walk me to school because the school was up the street from us. And for some reason, I got chocolate milk one day, really, really liked it. And anyway, I mustered up the courage to ask my dad for a quarter so I could get chocolate milk. He was like, sure. He goes in his pocket, I always had change on him, gives me the quarter, and then he asked me, do you want anything else? And in that moment, I'm 6 years old, and I was like, okay, if I ask for more money, I might get it, I might not get it, but I don't want to ruin the opportunity to ask for it in the future. So I'm calculating this out.
You were very smart.
I'm calculating this out at
Yeah.
6 years old to see exactly how many times could I actually get chocolate milk, right? So I was like, just now. I just asked for the quarter now, just because I could bank that probably in 2 weeks, I could probably ask for another quarter again, right? Just because that's how much I really enjoyed it, right? And so that was my first food memory. And I even thought, as I'm walking to school, why do I like chocolate milk so much? This is so weird. Like, I'm sure my friends don't like it near as much as I do, but I just really, really like it, right? Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the idea of the more that you get something, the less you appreciate it.
Yes.
The fewer, it's law, I think it's law of diminishing returns,
Yes,
if I'm not
it is,
mistaken. Okay? So the fewer times you get it, the more times you can actually appreciate it. Right. Certainly, I'm not doing advanced economics while I'm 6, walking to school. But in the same vein of that, like, I realized that this is something that I really, really like, and I want to be able to maximize this as many times as I possibly can. So that was my first food memory at 6. The other part of your question, Brian, I think you asked me was, how do I define American cuisine? If I'm not
At
mistaken?
this point, yeah, like,
At
well,
this point?
well,
Okay.
I'm gonna even say at this point, like, actually, we can kind of go a little back on that, but it's more with that memory, like, that was your American cuisine moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was. And I mean, I think that was also my introduction to actually even thinking about what I was eating. Because as a child, you're given things. There's no agency in what you're given.
Correct,
it's like, okay, it's like, hey, I don't want this. Like, yeah, well, you eat this or you starve.
Right.
Like, that. Those are your options,
You didn't
right?
pick chocolate milk out of a selection of 10 drinks. It was the one that they gave you, and then you
Yeah.
happened to like.
Yeah, it was maybe that or just regular milk.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
But I enjoyed it because it was the absence of it in my own house.
Yeah.
So
was there a point where you had a moment where you said, okay, I'm eating American food. This is what, like, where you were conscious of it being an American thing that you're eating.
you know,
what you would call it that.
I wouldn't necessarily call it that. It was just food at that point. I didn't necessarily put any sort of like parameters on it. But to answer your question, Brian, which is a very profound and a very complicated response, I'm going to take a step back and not comment on American food, but what is American?
I was gonna say
Because
is there an American cuisine?
Yeah,
Right.
because to take the cuisine out of it and just talk about American is, I think, the first fundamental way that we can kind of, at least for me, dismantle and unpack this question. Because like I said, it's so incredibly loaded. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of what it means to be American is really it means to be white.
Yeah.
That is the first, I think, baseline underlying assumption of that. In terms of there are certain identifiable markers within the cuisine that we house here continentally in the U.S. that we identify as quote-unquote American. Whether there's a large degree of our own individual agency in that or somebody gives it to us, there's a certain degree of definitions that we can all assume this is quote-unquote American. Whether it's the hamburger, that burger, fries, and shake, I think that is perhaps maybe one of the most quintessential kind of Americanized items. Okay. Now the thing about it is that who is making the burger, who gets to consume the burger, like those are other, I think, underlying fundamental questions. But the overall assumption of America, once again, is simply to be white. And so that's my underlying sort of analyses in terms of where I can kind of like take this response. Like the idea of hyphenated American is it takes the idea of the whiteness out of it, the normative of it. African, quote unquote, African American, Asian American, Latino American. So you see the sort of like divisions within that. So that is essentially un-American.
Not fully true.
Precisely.
There's no other way to look at it than
Precisely.
that. And me and Brian have discussed this plenty. Where I grew up in England, there's no such thing as an African British.
You're just a Brit.
You're just British. So that very much proves that to me to be true.
Yeah. So anytime you have some sort of attachment to ethnicity, it's immediately seen as un-American in that moment. So you have the inverse of that. So that's that's one of the first places I'm going to go kind of think about answering your question, Brian. Because when this nation exports food items or expresses culture, beyond that, there's a certain demographic that is the underlying assumption. So when we talk about exporting like American food, it is the hamburger,
Mm-hmm.
French fries, things of that nature. We are not talking about exporting pozole.
Correct.
Exactly.
That's not
Right.
considered American
Sure.
food.
Yeah, right.
We are not
Right.
exporting
Yeah.
chitlins and poke salad.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, with the pozole. That
Yeah.
was, ooh.
Yeah.
No, it's-
Yeah, we're not exporting chitlins and poke
Yes,
salad.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
And yes, that's very true.
so when you think about the idea of what American cuisine is,
Mhm.
it's a very complicated answer
Right.
because the first thing I have to think about is how do we define the American? There's a lot
Right.
more things that we could.
Could I respond briefly?
By all means.
And I
please.
think Ryan's gonna say I'm gonna fluff this, and he's gonna give the real content, the experience.
Yeah.
But responding to what you said, you're absolutely right. The whiteness, if you like, of America. This is known worldwide and
Yeah.
seen the same way worldwide. But what's interesting to me, beyond the burger, what the actual most authentic American cuisine is Southern food.
Well, I guess I'm about to go take over here.
From
That's
the
right.
Oh, yeah.
perspective of a
From the
Brit.
perspective,
Right.
well,
Trying
I
to
would say from the
understand
perspective of its origin
Right.
Okay.
is, I mean, you're gonna have to explain this better than I can.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
put it this way: the burger was reinvented by Americans.
Mhm.
You know, maybe originally from Hamburg, Germany, but popularized here in
Yep.
different styles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
However, food in the South, cornbread, grits, this stuff is not from Europe, from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
It's born and bred here. Now, you can have a long discussion about the circumstances of
Influences.
why that food was needed at a time. And
Mhm,
having
mhm,
said that,
mhm,
that is,
mhm.
to me, arguably the most American food.
Right.
But
I guess
I'll let you continue.
well, okay.
And I-
No,
and
you know,
you know,
it's brilliant.
to kind of segue with what you're saying, because I think this is a perfect time to bring you in, Vince, because
Mhm.
you know, Mexican origin, and your entire life has been in SoCal. So, I mean, like,
I had a very weird experience with food
Right.
growing up.
Mhm.
And I would say, like, understanding what American is, I think, as someone who grew up around, like, only Hispanic people, you know, like, I didn't understand what American food could or would or should be. I just knew what we were eating at the time was food.
Mm-hmm.
And I just assumed that because everybody that I know is eating the same thing, we're eating what anybody would call American food, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we identified Mexican, we identified Latinos, whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, when my mom makes milanesa and then somebody else says we had fried, you know, steak for dinner or whatever, I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, like, damn.
Yeah.
We eat the same stuff. So it's got to be American, right?
Right.
Like, carne asada, like everybody calls it skirt steak.
Mhm.
I didn't know the word skirt steak or the term skirt steak
Yeah,
until I moved up here.
That's amazing, yeah.
Which
Okay.
is so bizarre to me, man.
Yeah.
Like, but everybody was eating that, you know, for years, a decade or whatever, you know, like. So I think my experience with American food, I don't know if I even ever had an experience, you know, discovering American food. I think I kind of like what you said, I just started eating food.
Mm-hmm.
And these things just kind of
Mhm.
blend in, especially when you're in SoCal. I think the foods all blend together at a certain point.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
kind of just learn that Chinese food is orange chicken to me, you know, like, which is
And it's so much
horrible.
more than
It's
that.
totally horrible.
God, it's so much more than that.
That's
Yeah.
no editing.
Yeah. I understand. I mean, because it's all about
Like
your
pizza is
circumstances.
but
Yeah, I mean, it's all. I mean, you're a product of
In
your
fairness,
Right,
what
right.
you're describing is not your opinion of Chinese food. You're describing the American perception of Chinese
Amen
food,
to that.
and you're
Amen to that.
describing
Yeah.
What's the place? Your Panda Express is
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
describing,
Right.
Mhm.
not Chinese food.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Chinese food, there's no such thing as Chinese food. We split up into the different categories of China,
Right.
Yes.
and
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know enough to explain this as much as you two do, but there's a
No, you're right.
there's a
You're right.
Bangkok style chicken
Yeah.
as
yeah,
opposed to a Peking style or whatever it is.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So-
Yes, there's regions. too.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in that context, my experience with food was just probably I had a lot of Mexican inspired food
Mhm.
growing up.
Yeah.
My parents mixed in a lot of like cheap so-called American food into that because we couldn't afford a lot.
Mhm.
So it was just boxed stuff, you know,
Yeah.
like earlier we were talking about mac and
Right.
cheese.
Yeah.
I only knew mac and cheese as the blue box with the yellow letters on it.
Yep.
I didn't know
Yes.
nothing else, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
It was an affordable alternative
Yeah,
to your
right.
home food.
when I had homestyle mac and cheese the first time, Arpana made it for me. My Nepalese fiance made homestyle mac and cheese
Respect.
from scratch for me. And she said, I'm making mac and cheese. And I was like, I'd never seen somebody do it that way before she did it. So
It's an art form.
It's a weird...
It's such an art form.
Did you ever experience an attachment to lower quality food? Because I've met people that had similar experiences who, when trying the real thing, had developed this taste buds or flavor for the cheaper, kind of easier version, and that's what it was to them, and that's what it meant to them.
Maybe.
But that could also be tied to memory.
Yeah.
And memory is sometimes a secret ingredient that makes a dish so much more excitable.
Right.
Like, there was a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, one of my groomsmen, Jason. He loves a spot called Johnny's Pastrami. All right, it's on Adams, basically Adams and Crenshaw. And anyway, the owner sold the business, in business for 55 plus years, retired, moved on, right? And so anyway, somebody else came in and redid the place, and the whole area screams of gentrification. People are scared about it, right? And one of the things that he was real critical of is, he said, if it doesn't taste the same, I'm going to be real angry. And I said, well, one of the things you have to take into consideration, Jason, is memory is the secret ingredient that nobody else can really sort of replicate.
Right.
That you have this frame of reference that you are expecting this plate of food to hit, and if it doesn't, you are going to be disappointed. Yeah. Can you take an objective look at your sandwich and simply say, is the quality of your meal there? Can you objectively look at this minus the location? Because case in point, that man could have taken that exact same recipe, opened right across the street. Would you have anything to say about that? He said no. And I said, okay, so can you, as I said, we have these very serious sort of attachments to memory. But going back to what you had said in terms of who might prefer the boxed version of mac and cheese versus the homemade, at that point, I don't want to say neither one is better nor worse in terms of, I'm not here to kind of judge or value that, okay? Aside from nutrition aside, I'm going to put that aside, but it's kind of talking about, I'm not making a value statement about that, okay? But it's just about how does it make you feel?
Right.
Yeah.
Because let's say that your grandmother, who you loved dearly, made that for you, who has since passed on. There's no way on God's green
nobody
earth.
can replicate that.
Yeah, nobody can replicate that.
You know what?
Memory,
Even
because it gives you
further,
that comfort. You see what I mean?
If they did, you might be unwilling to believe that.
Yeah.
And that changes how it tastes.
And a lot of times,
precisely. So it's that memory, like I said.
And a lot of times you can't even get those recipes. They'll be like, "No, baby, you got to pull it out when there's like 6 bubbles on top."
And you know what, and that's really and that's really like part of home cooking too. That I know a lot of Black chefs pride themselves on is not needing to follow a recipe.
Right.
So there's a lot of cooking. As you know, there's a feeling to it. So it's like my dad was a mechanic, and sometimes he would try to explain something to somebody, and they would want a very sort of scientific answer, and he's like, I can't give that to you.
Right.
He's like, when
you look at it.
you can look at it, you can listen to it, you can feel it. Like when you're working on a car. And the same thing runs true. It's like between you and I, like somebody asks us, how do you know when steak's done? Don't cut into it. Yeah. You definitely don't do that. Right. Touch it.
Right.
And there's a certain way that you can feel it and you know exactly when your steak is done.
And that's at the beginning phase of learning how to cook a proper steak.
Like a good bartender won't measure.
No, they can feel the pour. Yeah. It's in their head, like they just know.
And there's something to be said, right, for certainly in cooking, and the chefs that are much more technical would say proportions matter, everything matters. But then there's the feeling is unmeasured, and that's unique.
Well,
how they make it.
That's right. That's a very good point.
Right.
It's a very good point that you're making.
Yeah, I think, but what you just brought up, I think that's what separates the mom and pop spot down the street versus a Michelin restaurant. When you start getting into that level of cooking, it's precision.
Yeah.
It's consistency, it's precision. So
things are
the chef has to think like a scientist. It's like, okay, I've got to make sure that everyone knows how to do this exactly right. Now, cooking itself is still fundamental. Like, it's still a sense. Like, you can have 8 things going. Just intuitively know how to move things to control the temperature, to get what you need, get the results that the chef is looking for.
Yeah.
But when you get to the past, you got that plate, it better be the right portion.
Yeah, exactly.
That heat better be right. Everything better be right.
Is that then how you would describe the perfect chef? Is someone who is precise with flair?
I mean,
because it's hard to have flair and be precise.
I think there's a level I think there is definitely a level of that, and I think that's where I wouldn't even say a perfect chef, but it gets into more of the difference between a professional chef and someone that just loves cooking, or that wants to do it as a career, or just wants to cook as a career. Like a professional chef, you're overthinking everything you're doing because you also have to translate it. So you're like, you have to think so much more and so far ahead for other people to understand it.
Right, because I think a lot of times to complement that, Brian, as a chef, you're controlling somebody's experience.
Yeah.
From start to finish versus just sitting down and having a meal.
Right.
And so, like, when you control somebody's experience, you are thinking about it, like you said, at another degree of analyses that the average person isn't going to. I mean, just also in how things are measured in a kitchen. Professionally is also very different than what we do in the house, too. So here in home kitchens, we use generally the imperial style of measurements. That's a very American thing. In England, you use the metric system. Okay. In many Michelin star restaurants, you use weights. So there's a certain way in which how salt is different.
Yeah.
You know, and so a cup of salt, that's a lot of salt. A tablespoon of salt versus 50 grams, of salt. You know what I mean? Is incredibly different. So it's like, when you think about things at, that level, very few chefs, I think, can do it well and do it off the cuff. The only person I think about is Trotter. Charlie Trotter, I think, was probably one of the only people that really did it because he treated cooking almost as jazz improvisation.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
did the technical stuff have to come first for him to become that? Same as a jazz player?
I definitely believe I'm gonna interject in that question. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like you don't like. I think I made that analogy earlier. It's like some people want to race in the Olympics but never ran track in high school. It's like no, you got to learn.
You need
the
muscle.
The flow couldn't come before the
precisely, and also with that cooking, it starts with craftsmanship, and few people take it to art.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And a lot of times people want to jump to the art. But they haven't mastered the fact of, do you know how to brunoise this shallow?
I think
if you haven't done that, then I don't care how artistically sound this plate or this composition is. If the chicken is undercooked, I'm going to die.
Right.
You fail.
But how do you pull in the people who have, maybe they've like created an experience that they love, that people really love. They did it on a small scale. They're expanding it into a larger scale. Those people may have known that experience and built that experience on such a level, nobody else can replicate it. But if an average person were to come in the restaurant, they would think like, oh man, this person's probably like been around the world, like professional chef, they've been doing this for decades, blah, blah, blah. So like, how do you compare those people to the people who did get all the technical skills and built the foundational skills and, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's two categories of chef here.
Right.
And both are not the same. I mean,
because we're talking a lot about chefs, and so every chef is different in their experiences and what they're bringing to the table. I mean, I could sit here and talk about, my experience working with Wiley versus my experience working with Kyle Connaughton. And it's like, well, Kyle's from SoCal, but spent time in Japan and in England. So his is different. He can actually execute so many like really cultured home cuisines, where Wiley was like more scientific, technical. It was the flair, but he knew American food. Like he could reinvent it in ways that you just go like, wait, this is a lobster roll or a crab roll, and it's a very classic. Everything about it is that way, but it's completely different. Same thing with like the eggs Benedict. That's like one of his most signature dishes. Where
Keller too.
Yeah, you're frying hollandaise sauce. Have you ever tried to fry like egg and butter? No,
it will explode.
Exactly, it doesn't work.
Wow.
But
Don't
he
do
took
it.
it to that level,
and
even in those, but even in that dish, in those cubes, not only is it hollandaise sauce, but the breading itself is actually dried out English muffins. That's a different level of never leaving the classic and bringing it, to the forefront.
That's art.
Else.
That's art.
That's so big.
And this makes me think about is like going off what you said, the difference in chefs. It's like there's such thing as a military chef who has to. It's not bad food. It's real food, but it's food for 1,000 soldiers.
Right.
Which is very different to the Michelin star chef.
Cafeteria mindset.
Exactly.
Doing it for.
But the skill and I guess that guy has to be extremely precise in this. It's almost like we were talking about precision and art and flair, but precision is art.
It is.
The guy that has to make 1,000 cakes and make them all exact, organized, that is art.
Yeah.
That's not a machine line production. That's art.
Commissary.
It's his human hands.
Commissary kitchen, whatever.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I love about cooking, food culture, is that I truly believe it is the one thing that cannot be removed by technology.
Right.
The atmosphere cannot be replicated by non-humans.
Right.
Because people do not go to the bar or the restaurant, like we've said, just for the food.
Right, and
They don't.
Maybe in Japan they do.
They do?
There are robots that serve food in Japan.
probably, but I mean, it's still
That's
not the
true,
same.
I guess. That
I
is
mean,
why-
but they also have amazing vending machines in Japan too.
like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
say,
yeah.
it's like,
I mean, their food culture is just ridiculous.
Hold on, in that culture, do people still yearn the desire to deal with humans in
I mean, I don't
bars?
know.
And,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's definitely an interaction phase to it. Yeah.
But you know what? I think that we also eat on different planes and different levels too. Sometimes we just need nourishment.
yeah.
You know, like sometimes you just need a turkey
Right.
wrap.
Absolutely.
Well, I know that Japan is famous for having the longest work day and having a culture in which the boss doesn't go home
Yeah.
until the employees go home.
Right.
And they're known to retire after the age of 70 and work 15-hour days. So that culture might come from nourishment through efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's a good segue to the question of how did you, like, we all love food, obviously, like in some way, and it's going beyond. But to fall in love with food is going beyond just the necessities, right?
Right.
Sure.
It's like
Sure.
it's seeing it as a bigger picture and saying
Yes.
there are moments where I'm craving sushi, I'm going down the street, or I'm craving a nice dinner, and I might go into town and do something. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
shout out to
I
Billy
guess
Crew on this one because that's my favorite restaurant still. But you know,
I guess
might go to Crew.
there's a humility in this whole potluck is that we only love food because we can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. I mean, Dave Chang once said that sadly, to love food in America automatically deems you as being an elitist. And it shouldn't be that
I've
way.
heard that quote.
And it shouldn't be that way. He said if we appreciated food more, we would consume a lot less bad food.
Yes.
Right.
And so what I think about with Chang's quote is the intersection between commerce and food. In terms of how corporations have taken over feeding people.
Quantity over quality.
Yeah, precisely. So when you had your hamburger, somebody in an office decided
Correct.
this is going to be the ideal portion
Yes.
that you will receive. I don't care if you enjoy it. I don't care if it's nutritious.
Right.
You're going to get this for your $5.
Yeah.
And the pitfall with that is that you had no say-so in what's in it. Of course, there's options. You don't have to eat this. You can eat somewhere else.
It will become your expectation.
Right.
They will create it for you.
Right.
And then also the idea of, with people working more here in America, we are also sold the idea of you are too tired to cook.
Yes.
There aren't enough hours in the day. How about you let us, as the corporation,
Yes.
take care of the hard work for you? Hey, you don't have to do the dishes. I'll even take care of all that for you. Okay?
Right.
How great would that be for you to be able to sit home, have a meal, and not have to think about washing a dish?
Yes. And it makes me think about how in many ways Americans are guilty of this and victims of it. Because we do have to work a lot to survive.
Right.
People do live paycheck to paycheck, most of us.
Right.
Mhm.
And if you look at it as a financial calculation, oftentimes the time spent to cook is slightly cheaper in ingredients, but the time you spend is not too different from eating out. And it's been made that way. But it's stopped us thinking about the value of cooking. And I can say from personal experience, I'm studying all day, and sometimes I'm so stressed studying, I'll order a pizza or order Chipotle, and my girlfriend will stop me and say, but you didn't consider how good it makes you feel to stop and chop an onion.
Right.
And throw it in the pan and feel the smell.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
De-stressing.
But I lost that. I lost that during the pandemic.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I lost that because of how easy they made accessible these apps for food.
Yeah.
And what I started to feel was I started to crave not restaurants or particular foods, the restaurant taste.
Yeah.
Fat.
Yeah.
Salt.
Fat
Or
and
sugar.
salt.
Fat,
yeah.
salt, and sugar.
And it just, I had to go back to cooking at home and forget the time, forget the money, it's worth it.
Yeah. And you know, there's also, I heard an economics equation, I don't know who said it, but they said in a nutshell, the less time you put into it, the more of it you will actually consume.
Yeah.
And so...
Simpler is better. I mean,
Yeah. Well, no. The thing about it is that if you've ever tried to fry a French fry and do it properly, that's a pain. It's a pain to do it because, I mean, to properly fry French fries, you have to fry it at least twice.
Yeah, you can blanch.
Yeah, and then you go back for that second fry. So
I worked at Wingstop.
Yeah. And your wings and your fries are delicious, right? Especially when they're done right?
Seasoned perfectly.
Yeah. But if I have to put less time into it, I'm simply going to eat more. And so now you have a much more obese society who didn't put any time into doing it.
Absolutely.
You know, and then another thing about that is that if you're not cooking your own meals, there's not that lineage that you have with somebody who has previously cooked. You're breaking that tradition. That's the thing that I was fortunate enough to fall in love with at an early age. Grew up with a lot of amazing food in my house. My dad's from New Orleans, and my mom's from Vietnam.
Damn.
And I never thought about it. I was like, I just like going back to your memory about like food. You're like, it's just food. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's the same thing. I just thought it was food. So it's like, you know, for Thanksgiving, like there would be the traditional like American fare, like turkey and yams and stuffing next to spring rolls. That would just be my plate. That would just be my plate, right? Crazy. And like I never thought about it until I got into college, and my first English teacher was a really, really great guy. He inquired about my background. And every mixed race person hates the question, what are you? It's insanely obnoxious. And it's very insensitive. But he inquired about it, but he asked it in a very polite manner that I never ever forgot. He said, tell me where your parents are from.
Right.
And I told him, and he paused for a solid 10 seconds, and he just said, man, I bet you have killer food at your house. And I was like,
the first thing comes to your mind.
And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And anyway, like, you know, having said that, I am thankful and blessed to have a mother who's an amazing cook and who loved to cook, but also cooked out of necessity. Coming from Vietnam, there wasn't this hyper culture of eating out. There was certainly street foods, but there wasn't that intense capitalism sort of mindset in order to take over your dining room table. It was just, hey, the lady across the street, hey, makes really good such and such, you know, things of that nature, right? And so anyway, like my mom grew up very, very, you know, poor, right? So she had to cook in order to eat. Same thing with my father. You know, eating out is a very recent phenomenon here in America. I don't know if it's necessarily global, internationally speaking.
But just to quickly say, this brings me back to the first question. That is unequivocally something that was a huge shock to me in America, is eating out is so casual. It is so casual. In England, most restaurants have dress codes that are above $10 an entree. If you don't, unless it's a quick and easy burger and fries, there's your dress code. And it might not be a tuxedo, but it will be no shorts, no sandals.
You have to go there with intention.
The first time in America I went to a middle upper class place was Cattleman's Steakhouse, which to me at the time was expensive food because a steak's $50 or $60. And somebody was taking me there, and I remember walking in and seeing, to be frank, large Americans in sandals.
You can call them fat, it's okay.
Oh, I guess if I call them Americans, it's implied.
Yeah, it's true.
But just they were in shorts and sandals, and it just looked like the beach. But I'm looking at the menu and thinking, where's the disconnect? And why is it in Europe that people believe if food is of a certain quality, the atmosphere should reflect it, whereas here, your pockets get you in. If you can pay, you're in. In England, you have to be presentable as well. So I thought that, for me, that was shocking. That's shocking.
That is fascinating. Second question, right? This was it
still goes back to
it's the first question, because what is American cuisine?
And you know what, I would also say, sorry to cut you off, Bree, but the idea of eating a steak is also a quintessentially American thing. I think that the consumption of red meat here in America, I think, number one, always or usually denotes a certain degree of wealth, accessibility, but as well as it is a prized meal. Like when you have a steak dinner, like you have arrived.
Yes.
For lots of different reasons. Not everyone knows how to cook a steak.
Yes.
Okay. Nobody knows how to cook it. Most importantly, you know how to do it properly. Not everyone knows how to do it, but it's. I think it's a sign of decadence and excess. Because I think internationally, we as Americans probably lead the pack in terms of consumption of red meat. You know, so it's like, you know,
because you lead in wealth.
Right. And but also the idea of coming to America is the land of milk and honey. It's always been categorized as that for those who voluntarily come.
You're right about the steak
to
dinner.
America.
In Vegas, in the casinos, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, when someone would win, they used to say, winner, winner, steak dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You're right about that. You're right about that. Right. And so like, you know, when I would go to Vietnamese restaurants with my mom, like the idea of getting red meat was always in conjunction with eating rice and vegetables.
Right.
It wasn't just you're gonna get a porterhouse and that's it.
Or with potatoes.
Right. You know what I mean? And so just like her perception of just how we eat food here in America is very different than what she grew
That's
up
so
eating.
true. That's such a good...
My first steak, I'm sorry. My first steak was the one I told you about when I was in Tennessee, in Nashville, was at Husk.
You went to Husk?
It was the first real steak I ever had.
Man, Husk is amazing. Husk is amazing.
It was
Just
$130 for that steak, man.
Yeah,
like,
but it was
my one time I was going to go there, and I was like, I'm just going to blow it out, and I'm going to get the best thing they got.
Right.
But you're right about the decadence and having it be sort of like a prize type of experience, because I had never had a steak that good in my life.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fries were fried in the beef fat after they had made the steak.
Yeah.
You know, so like everything in that meal kind of just changed my perception of like what an expensive meal was.
Right.
Did it change, like, did you feel like how far it goes?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I feel when like the best steak I ever had was a restaurant in London. It was Argentinian steak. Argentinian steak, for whatever reason, is absolutely incredible. But and it was the first time, like you said, and that's what I felt is like, well, I thought fancy food was really good, but I never felt, oh, this is a staircase that just keeps going. You feel things you've never imagined. So
you never, I think, as a kid, you never understand. Like if you're not around food a lot, or you don't understand food, you don't understand the triple-digit dishes. Or those experiences. Like I would never even contemplate that as a kid.
Right. Like to me as a kid, I like a fancy steak was sirloin. Because that was, it wasn't expensive, but it was more than you would have to pay for dinner. You know.
And I think this all what we're saying is all kind of like, as we're getting ready to go into the second part of this, as we're talking about our love for food and where do we get our love from, it is that experience. It is that it starts at home. Honestly, it does start right there. Like for me, my mother worked 5 days a week. And my dad was working 5 days a week, and then he'd work on the weekends as he'd have me out there delivering firewood. But my mom would cook Monday through Thursday. Here and there it'd be like Saturday, Sunday. Friday you on your own. That was it. She got groceries, you're on your own. Like you better figure it out. And you might get pizza. Once in a while you might get pizza or something like that. But those were the experiences. Like it went from necessity to, oh wow, I'm getting pizza. Now that necessity has become the luxury for me. It's like I miss that part.
I didn't appreciate my cooking mother until I met mothers who don't cook.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
That is just 100% honest.
That's it.
Yep.
I thought, Mom, you're making me this today. We could have just got noodles. No, I've appreciated vegetables, rice, and a protein on the plate almost every day.
And that's the same with my mom too.
That's that non-American mindset. It's a complete meal, not one thing.
Yeah.
And if you ask a nutritionist, they would tell you. This still shocks me. Protein is like less than 20% of the diet. The American way doesn't make much sense.
No, I mean, we as Americans consume way too much protein.
But it's because Americans enjoy luxury.
Right.
It's the idea of luxury, not necessity.
We commoditize that experience.
So in economics, what you said about red meat is factually true. It's not just, it's constant. In fact, if America has more money next year, we'll be eating more red meat.
Right.
It literally follows non-linearly. It just keeps going. And in the last 30 years, were people eating Wagyu as commonly here 30 years ago as they are today? No. Because America is growing and we have higher consumption access to that red meat. And why do we have cows from Japan?
Because we can.
Because we can.
That's what
I guarantee you the vast majority of Japan doesn't eat Wagyu.
They don't. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, Ajan, who went over. Ajan and Jason went over to Japan, and they were looking for Wagyu. They were looking for
It's all exported.
And they were like they were talking to somebody from Japan. They were like, yeah, we don't eat that.
Yeah.
we don't eat that because we can't afford it.
Right.
So I mean, going back to economics too. One of the things that I think about is, now correct me if I'm wrong, have you ever read Marx's Capital?
No.
Okay. So he has this concept called commodity fetishism.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not.
Probably. But...
So the idea, I'm going to like oversimplify it. I'm still working through it. But the idea of commodity fetishism is the idea of if I consume this or I have access to this, this is going to make me into something else. So if I own Jordans as the shoe, I am going to play better as an athlete.
Yes.
Now, that's a very oversimplified version of commodity fetishism.
I think you did well. That's
right.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to take this one step further in terms of how do we interrogate our needs and our desires. Are they pure, or do we like things because we are told that we should like them?
So are you referring to, like, of course we know Wagyu is high quality, but do we perceive it as more exotic because it's from Japan?
Right. Or is it any better?
At all, yeah.
Then,
what we have here.
then you know, all right. Yeah, it is. Okay, all right, yeah, it is. Because I've had it. I was like, I've had like 6 ounces, and I was like, this is on a whole nother
I guess the point is, since we work in local food, farm to fork, so the economic idea here that is disturbing in terms of food is that in the Japanese economy, farmers are entering the Wagyu business because of American consumers.
Capitalism. American
right?
Right.
And they are in a rush to get there.
Right.
Which has nothing to do with feeding their own people.
Precisely. And then also, the Wagyu that we get here is probably crap.
Yeah.
Compared to what they get. So there was another chef named Josh Skeens, as you know Skeens, right? So one of the things he had said to Dave Chang in the podcast was, he was talking about Parmesan. And he said, most Parmesan that we get here in America is like 6 out of 10.
Yes.
Most of it is 6 out of 10.
That's right.
He said, and then all the crap that they don't want in Italy, they just ship it out to us, and we think it's great, right? But he said above that, between like the 7 and the 8s is where you might get some chefs that really know about it. The 9s and the 10s, like 1% understands that. Right. So when I think about your economics equation in terms of the Wagyu that we get here, it constitutes as it, but it's not it's not going to be A5.
Right.
Absolutely
It's
not.
almost like the selling point of a brioche bun is the fact that it's French.
Yeah. Or the idea that it is, or the idea that it is brioche.
I'm the only one that's saying that. Wait a minute. These things are delicious. Like,
No, I mean they are.
I guess it's
but on a menu. But on a menu,
the consumer's thinking about it.
the consumer thinks about options in terms of, why would I want to get a regular white bun?
Yes.
Brioche sounds fancy.
Right.
Therefore, I'm going to buy it.
It must be better.
Not only
It must
that,
be better.
if it costs $2 more, doesn't that make sense to you when it says brioche?
Yeah. I mean, if you were painted with the option, if you're given the option of brioche versus wonder.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's an oversimplification, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? But however, you are going to go that route.
So
I
I guess
you can equate this to bringing it out of the food a little bit. You can equate this to cameras. Like people often say, well, if I get a better camera, more expensive camera, my picture's going to be better. My experience is going to be better.
So I guess what we can conclude is that the American food consumer is very willing to pay for what's exotic.
Right.
More so because, not even necessarily because they enjoy it, but because they like to one-up somebody else who doesn't have access to it.
It's that commodity fetishism that you're talking about.
It's like, sorry for lack of a better term, I'm going to shit on you.
Yeah.
Because I have access to this. And I think a lot of times now the experience of dining now is going to be coupled with you taking pictures of it and you post it online to make everybody else feel bad about what they're eating because they're not eating what you're eating.
That's so
and we're going to do that tomorrow night too, by the way. We're definitely going to do that tomorrow night too, buddy.
That's so interesting you say that, because if you go this far back, and this is crazy, if you go to ancient Rome, they didn't have tons of food options. The way that people's wealth was shown off was the variety of mushrooms on a plate.
Wow.
Interesting.
In ancient Rome, right? Because that was one of the ways that one of the foods that was very clearly to
very rare,
right?
expensive,
And who had the good ones? Only a few would.
Right.
But it's this notion of shitting on people through your plate. Is very active.
Like look at my truffle fucking burger that I
Or look at my $120 steak too.
Bro, like I did that.
Okay.
I was like, my
like,
picture was fine.
I know it was, and I know it was great.
Would you agree that as much of that experience eating the steak, buying a $120 steak is also part of that experience? Because that's how you describe it. You don't describe it as just an amazing steak.
Right.
You
And I
it's a $120
I wouldn't
steak.
even have known how to explain what was good about it.
Right.
It's the fact that
Because I don't understand how